Ciao everyone, my name is Danny. I think everybody knows me, but for those who might not know, my name is Danny. I am currently the Interpreting Program Director for the National Technical Institute for the Deaf, NTID, and their Bachelor's in American Sign Language English Interpreting Program. So today, my goal is to try and convince you all to come to America and visit our university. So here is Rochester, New York, and I'll talk a little bit about Rochester, why Rochester is so special, in addition to why NTID is a very important part of the deaf community. Kind of already went over this, but here's what I'll be sharing with you all today. I'll be sharing a little bit about Rochester, New York, about what professional interpreting looks like in America, a bit more about the Institute, some jobs and opportunities that we have in the United States, a little bit more about our program and the specific courses that we offer. Okay, I'm going to play a short video. The video has Italian subtitles. So it is in spoken English, but has Italian subtitles. Rochester. So those people are speaking, but I don't know where their voices were. But that's okay, they don't really say too much. So I think the video is relatively self-explanatory. Okay. So a little bit more about Rochester. We are located, I probably should have showed you a map, but we are, if you imagine New York City is south of the state, and we are northwest, closer to Toronto. We're about 6 hours from New York City by car, closer to Toronto, Canada, so about 2 hours from Canada. Close to Buffalo, Niagara Falls. Buffalo is about an hour from Rochester, and Niagara Falls is approximately an hour and 15 minutes. Both the American and Canadian side of the falls. So Rochester is very special because we have the largest deaf population per capita in the United States. So we have approximately 45,000 deaf and hard of hearing people within Rochester. So Rochester has approximately, it's less than 500,000 total people. I believe it's 200 to 250,000 people, and out of them, approximately 45,000 are deaf and hard of hearing who use sign language. Not just people who are older and sign, but these are culturally deaf people who use sign language. Within Rochester, there's a lot of special things that we're very fortunate to have. So we have the Rochester Recreation Club for the Deaf, which is a very well-known club for deaf individuals. We have the National Center for Deaf Health Research, which focuses a lot on doing research for deaf individuals and making sure that healthcare is accessible to deaf people. We have the Deaf Wellness Center, which is housed within the University of Rochester, which is a medical school, and they focus a lot on supporting deaf people and their health and wellness. And we also have, what else do we have? We have a lot of other things. Sure. And we have, what was that? You can add. So I'll have Abigail add just a bit. You'll add later. Later. Okay, we also have the Rochester School for the Deaf. So this is the primary school for deaf individuals. And I will be sure to send Joffrey a copy of this PowerPoint, and so we can make sure that it is all shared with you. But this is early childhood education, so for deaf children, kindergarten to 12th grade before they graduate.
I don't understand.
So that's okay. Sure. Rochester School for the Deaf, which is the primary school for deaf children. And so it has grades kindergarten to 12th grade.
Asilo.
It was founded in 1876. And in addition, they also offer ASL classes for the community, as well as families of deaf children. And they are focused more on individualized learning and follow a bilingual, bicultural model of pedagogy. A little bit about what the interpreting profession looks like in the United States. There are no national laws or requirements to screen interpreters. It varies state by state, and so some states have more strict requirements than others, but there's no national requirement to become a sign language interpreter. For example, in the United States, I give this example to my students. If you were to go to a salon or a hairdresser to cut your hair, a barber, you will see that they have a little plaque on their wall, right, because they had to go through some type of exam or test to be able to become certified.
There is like video explain something in ASL.
In ISL?
No, in ASL.
In ASL. This?
I don't understand. There is a salon.
Ha fatto l'esempio di una professione che ha bisogno di una certificazione. Non c'entra niente. È solo l'esempio di una professione. Questa certificazione non serve invece per gli interpreti.
But for sign language interpreters, there's no requirement to have that. So the person cutting my hair had to be screened and had to be credentialed. But a deaf person who goes to the doctor's office, their interpreter may not have needed any type of screening or credential. But it varies state by state. Some states have a requirement, some states do not. We do have several important organizations, however. We have right here, which is the Registry of Interpreters for the Deaf, which is RID. And they were founded in 1964. And their responsibility is to create the credentialing system in which interpreters can get their certification. So I'll talk a little bit more about them in a bit, but that's one method of getting credentialed. In order to get credentialed, there is no requirement to have a degree in interpreting, but there are 100, I don't remember exactly how many. There are over 100 educational programs within the United States that focus on American Sign Language English interpreting. Out of those, 100 and some odd. There are very few that are credentialed, that have a credential. There's a credentialing body, which I am part of, that credentials interpreter training programs.
C'è un organismo di certificazione che però è privato e che rilascia queste certificazioni. Ciò che non è necessario, secondo RID, è il possesso di un titolo di laurea, di un titolo accademico.
Laurea non serve come detto. Anche l'ultima parola. Lui stava dicendo per me, io magari mi blocchi perché non lo capisco. Se lei vuole fare uno shoutage,
sì, bello anche per noi.
fai così.
Bello.
Poi può anche stare tenuto, dice Carlo, non si chiama
Perché lo slang in americano immagino che sia molto...
È meglio che ti parli qua.
There are approximately 15,000 members of RID who are interpreters. And of those 15,000, 10,000 are nationally certified. Within the United States, 92% of interpreters are white, and 98% of interpreters are female. So I am what they call a rare unicorn as a male interpreter. We also have
interpreti di black interpreter.
8%, only 8%. That poses a significant problem because the majority of the deaf community is similar to the American community, which has a high percentage of Black and Hispanic individuals. And so our interpreters don't look like our deaf community. And so that has posed a significant issue within our community. Lastly, we have the Conference of Interpreter Trainers, which is CIT. And they are established to support interpreter education. And then lastly, we have the National Association for the Deaf, which is NAD. A little bit about jobs within the United States and what interpreters do. Within the United States, the demand for interpreters is higher than the supply. And interpreters work in the following settings. A little bit about the salary of American Sign Language interpreters. Approximately the average is $43,655.
L'anno?
But on average. Now more about our college and our university. One more video I will show you. This one is captioned in,
With subtitle? No.
subtitles, yes, with Italian subtitles. No, English, I apologize, English. I did forget to mention, I am a former student of our program. So I entered our program in 2005, and I graduated in 2009. I started to work as a full-time interpreter, interpreting on campus for deaf and hard of hearing students. And I did that for about 5 years, while simultaneously getting my master's degree in interpreting. After that, I went back to teach in our program, so I went back to my alma mater, and I have been there ever since. In 2020, right as COVID hit, our former director had retired, and so I've been the current director since. A little bit about NTID and its history. NTID was founded in 1965. At the time, it was President Lyndon B. Johnson who signed the charter to establish the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. I'll share a little bit more about some student life, and I'll have Abigail talk a little bit from a student's perspective as well about student life later, and I'll also talk a little bit about our accessibility or access services. This is one of my classes, and this is one of our classrooms. You can see we have cameras on top of, in the ceilings for our students. And here you can see an example of a deaf individual coming to class with a hearing person, and my student is interpreting. And so we're assessing her interpreting. And here are the classes. So the National Technical Institute for the Deaf is housed within a larger university, the Rochester Institute of Technology, also known as RIT. This is just some facts about the larger university RIT. Within the Rochester Institute of Technology, there are 11 different colleges. And one of those colleges is the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. Total RIT has over 15,000 students. And out of those 15,000 students, approximately 1,200 are deaf and hard of hearing. And those 1,200 deaf students are spread throughout the various colleges. So we have deaf students studying business, engineering, computer science, science, health, and so on and so forth. And so you'll find interpreters interpreting in all of these classes. I think it's important to share a little bit about the costs. NTID is a federally funded university. And so the cost for deaf students is substantially lower than the cost for an average student who's hearing. As interpreting students, we benefit from reduced tuition, just the same as the deaf students, because we're housed under NTID. So if you could see the differences in cost, right? $69,496 for per year. Per year. Versus NTID, which is $34,000. 34,000. It ends up being approximately a third of the cost. Mais ou menos. Per year. College is very expensive in the United States, unfortunately, which is why many of our youth, including myself, are in debt. Just a little bit about where the deaf students are coming from, right? This map shows the percentage of where the deaf students are. Can you repeat that?
Sì, stavo guardando. Ma qua si tratta di sordi, deaf people.
Deaf students.
La provenienza geografica.
Most are from the Northeast, of course, which is where we are, here in New York. This is where we're located. And most of our students are from here. 3% are international students. These are international deaf students, and they pay a higher tuition than deaf students from the United States.
I'm sorry, who?
The international deaf students who come to study at the university pay more.
Ci sono anche studenti internazionali che vengono dall'estero, ma naturalmente pagano una quota più alta degli studenti americani.
And there's approximately 10,000 alumni worldwide.
Ci sono circa 10.000 ex studenti in tutto il mondo.
So the NTIE has approximately 144 faculty, so teachers,
Docenti della facoltà 144.
137 full-time sign language interpreters,
137 interpreti.
60 what we call captionists,
Sottotitolatori 60 reali.
and captionists will essentially, like similar to interpreters, but will take what's in spoken English and type it. Got stenographer, do you have stenographers in the court system?
Sottotitolatori.
So that we have them as well in the classroom. Class sizes are small.
Un insegnante e ogni 7 studenti.
C'era Valerio che stava dicendo non c'è nessuno che parla, c'è un registratore magari che manda in automatico i sottotitoli e c'è un apparecchio che si occupa di riformulare ciò che ho detto in voce tramite un testo scritto.
No, I understood.
Software,
Yes,
automatic
sì.
captionism.
Sometimes, yeah, sì.
E lei come fa lezione? And how do you do your lesson?
How do I do my lessons?
Yes.
Some are in spoken English.
He would like to know how many kind of accessibility do you have, for example, subtitles, but Rochester prefer which of?
Oh.
I want to know how many kind of accessibility do you use inside your university, and then which is your preferred? Subtitles, who speak, and then or someone who reads.
Yes.
Who write.
Sì.
Ci suggerisci che però le domande alla fine, se no lui perde il filo del discorso.
It's good he asked because
Tutte le domande alla fine, così lui non viene interrotto.
I did forget some. So we have note takers, captionists, sign language interpreters, and some of the technology that I don't know the English word for, voice recognition software. Those are the 4 types. And as far as preference, our deaf students, those 1,200 approximately deaf students, some are hard of hearing and don't use sign language, and so they tend to prefer captioning, note-taking.
I soldati preferiscono i sottotitoli.
And we also have deaf students who use sign language to communicate, and they prefer interpreters.
Naturalmente gli studenti che studiano preferiscono l'inglese.
if you look here at this chart, it shows the degree to which each of those are used, interpreting how many hours were provided in a year's worth of time. 91,075 classroom hours versus outside of the classroom, meaning sports, clubs, concerts, performances. 41,000. So approximately 130,000 interpreting hours per year. And you can see captioning is much less. Note taking approximately 40,000. So more interpreting, more sign language interpreting. And then this is what degree programs our deaf students are in. And you can see that our program is approximately 13% of NTID students. We have approximately 160 students across the 4-year program. We're a 4-year program. So we have 160 interpreting students. This just talks about employment rate. It just essentially says that, talks about some of the companies that our students end up working for post-graduation. And 96% of our graduates find work within a year after graduating from our university. And then in terms of economics.
Excuse me, can we come back a bit?
Sure.
Quite interesting.
Yes.
The economic sectors employing the interpreters is quite important.
So yes, these are deaf students and where they're or deaf graduates and where they're working. So what you'll find is sign language interpreters who are interpreting for our graduates will likely be in these sectors.
67% nell'industria, il
Business, industry, largest.
8% in istituzioni governative, interpreti sopra, e il 25% invece in istituzioni no profit, associazioni e mondo della scuola.
Although most
Then we are talking only of deaf interpreters or altogether deaf and hearing interpreters?
these are these are deaf graduates.
Deaf
Deaf graduates.
Okay.
Our statistics for our students predominantly work in education, interpreting, and video relay service. So when deaf people make phone calls, those are the two highest.
Maggioranza dei servizi della scuola, ma anche dei servizi di comunicazione a distanza come quelli delle chiamate telefoniche, perché in Italia sono i servizi ponte.
And then if you look at graduates, deaf students, these are deaf students, who graduate from our program versus deaf students who graduate from other universities, that our graduates are 178%, forget the numbers, they earn a lot more. They earn significantly more income versus deaf graduates from other universities.
Nella vita guadagnano molto più dei laureati in ambiti istituti. The basic cost.
I will wait for, Abigail will talk more about this. But this is our performing arts, and I'll have Abigail talk a bit more about that. But performing arts is a very big part of the National Technical Institute for the Deaf. And here you can see this is a photo of our theater. We have a very large theater and a very large theatrical program, including a major. And here's one of the performances The Wizard of Oz. And
Un'immagine di uno spettacolo.
I believe following a similar model as we have been with deaf and hearing actors.
E il modello metodologico è molto simile a quello che si sta cercando di impiegare qui. Thank you very much indeed.
So in addition to we have a bachelor's degree, a 4-year program for our interpreting students. We also have a master's specific in healthcare interpreting.
C'è un master specifico nell'interpretariato per i servizi sanitari.
And then we have several non-credit bearing certificate programs.
E poi ci sono altri corsi di specializzazione in interpretariato per il mondo della scuola, delle professioni sanitarie. C'è uno specifico certificato per l'interpretariato esercitato da persone sorde e anche un certificato per l'interpretariato trilingue. What about trilingual? Which are the languages?
So, so they're open to other languages. Predominantly Espanol, so Spanish,
Soprattutto lo spagnolo.
because there's a high percentage of deaf individuals in the United States who
C'è una
are,
grande percentuale.
but it's not limited to just that. It's open to other languages as well.
So it could be ASL and LIS.
Or ASL and spoken Italian.
Spoken Italian as well. Quindi non ci sono limitazioni.
And that's our newest program. That's our newest program. Okay. So a little bit about our program. We expect minimum competency for our students in ASL before they come into our program. It's ASL 2 is what it's called.
Bisogna sapere un po' di ASL prima di entrare per essere ammessi.
From what I've gathered with my interactions with you all, you would meet that minimum.
Voi sareste ammessi tutti.
During the first 2 years of the program, the focus is on language acquisition, so learning about deaf culture and American Sign Language.
I primi 2 anni enfatizzano soprattutto l'apprendimento linguistico e la conoscenza della cultura sorda.
And then the last 2 years are focused on specifically interpreting.
Gli ultimi 2 anni sono dedicati in modo specifico all'interpretariato.
This is our leadership team, and I am the only hearing person on our leadership team.
Lui è l'unico utente di tutto il board di quelli che governano l'università.
We have
Tutto l'università.
our department chair, who's Dr. Keith Cagle. So they all,
Capo dipartimento è sordo.
everyone's deaf, right? Everyone's deaf except me. And both Dr. Cagle and Dr. Listman have their EDD or PhD.
Hanno minimo un dottorato di ricerca. Sono sordi.
E loro usano l'interprete? Cioè
They
loro
use
sono
interpreters?
quelli che... Ah sì,
They use interpreters?
They do.
They do.
So if they have a meeting with,
loro fanno anche il corso. Allora il dipartimento è una cosa, c'è il dipartimento che gestisce gli interpreti. Cioè questo qua è solamente il this is only the department who manage the interpreter.
correct.
Questo è il management. Questo è il management.
The president or the dean of the National Technical Institute for the Deaf is also deaf himself.
Anche il dean, il rettore è sordo.
This talks just a little bit about the type of support services we give our interpreting students.
Questi sono i servizi che danno supporto agli studenti.
In the last year of their program, students are sent to do a practicum internship.
Sono state fatte molti tirocini per fare della pratica esterna,
Yes, so they would be paired with a mentor. A mentor.
Sono sempre guidati da un mentore.
in those settings I shared with you before, educational, healthcare, legal, business.
Tutti questi tirocini si fanno nei settori di cui abbiamo parlato prima, quindi dalla scuola alla sanità, alle aziende commerciali e così via.
So Abigail, for example, is currently in her practicum. And so she gets to count this as part of her hours. So Abigail's in her internship.
Abigail in questo momento sta facendo proprio, venendo qui in Italia, una parte del suo tirocinio, perché questo IAB, that's a study abroad program, no?
Correct. Yes.
È una parte del suo tirocinio.
We have had other study abroad program opportunities. These,
Sono dei programmi di collaborazione con l'estero.
all of these focused on deafness and deaf culture.
Tutti
The only other
pensati sulla cultura sorda dei vari paesi.
The only other program we've had that's similar to the relationship we have with Fermo
Sono programmi simili a quello che abbiamo qui a Fermo.
is with a university in Holland, in Utrecht,
Utrecht, con un'università olandese a Utrecht.
where we would have a student exchange program with their interpreting students.
Uno scambio proprio di studenti con studenti che fanno interpretariato.
That's what we're hoping to have with Fermo.
Yes? We do.
Here's just some examples. Here's our, where are they now?
Siete giri di Rolando.
Ah,
A little bit about the courses that we offer. So this is year one. Focus again is on American Sign Language and
I crediti che vengono dati anno per anno anche le materie.
introduction to the field of interpreting, and then general education requirements that the Institute requires, English, math. Year two, still the focus is on American Sign Language and deaf culture. Deaf culture, linguistics.
Esatto, poi il focus si sposta anche sulla deaf culture, oltre che proseguire il lavoro sulla ASL.
Years three, they're still learning American Sign Language, but now they're starting interpreting courses.
Ethical.
Yes, that's the course I teach.
Your course.
That's my course.
E si insegna anche etica della...
Ethics for interpreters. And then we start to focus on one directional, so interpreting one direction, English to ASL, and then another course, ASL to English.
Terzo anno ci si specializza in una direzione o in un'altra, che quindi può essere traduzione attiva o passiva in una o in un'altra lingua.
And then the last year is focused on this practicum or internship.
C'è una parte importante dedicata al tirocinio.
There's a research course where students have to write a thesis, capstone.
Gli studenti devono scrivere una tesi di ricerca, ovviamente sui temi dell'interpretariato.
And then we have specialized elective courses. So for example, interpreting in healthcare, interpreting in legal, interpreting in video relay
Nel
service.
quarto anno ci sono anche i corsi definiti elective, cioè sono i corsi a scelta, quelli che noi chiamiamo materie opzionali.
So students can specialize.
They specialize, yes, they choose.
Correct. Correct.
That's why they are elective.
Correct. Okay. I had one more thing. Oh, the other thing about just general in Rochester is because we have a lot of graduates from our university, we have a lot of deaf professionals in the community.
Sono
So
molti professionisti sordi della comunità proprio a Rochester.
we have deaf doctors, deaf
Dottori
dentists,
sordi,
deaf veterinarians,
ingegneri sordi.
engineers. We have deaf individuals who are can potentially be in very high level positions.
Possono avere posizioni di alto livello.
And interpreters find themselves interpreting for these deaf professionals, so people who have PhDs and very high levels of education.
E spesso gli interpreti lavorano per queste persone di alto livello, sorde.
I'm going to turn the floor over to Abigail for a second, and I'll interpret to just talk a little bit about what it's like as from a current student perspective.
Adesso Abigail ci farà un panorama dal punto di vista dello studente.
Okay, so my experience in the program has been that, just as Danny was saying, I started off as I had taken a couple ASL classes in high school, and so I had that minimum level of ASL 2 going into it. But I got on campus and there were so many deaf people, and I realized that I didn't know the language. And so it took me my first year to really get comfortable having conversations and hanging out with deaf people, and I spent a lot of time not knowing what was going on, kind of like when I got here on Monday. So I experienced a little bit clueless. So, but what was really valuable was that I made friends with deaf people outside of the classroom. And so with those friendships, we'd be up late chatting and playing games and sharing life together. And so with that kind of experience, I got to see how the language was really used. So I would take those experiences back to the classroom, and I had a much more rich experience and understanding of the language because I was learning it with the community in mind.
E quando sono tornata in classe, questo naturalmente ha significato per me capire meglio che cosa significa, insomma, usare questa lingua nella vita di tutti i giorni.
So then, halfway through, we really start to focus on interpreting, and for some people in my year, that's when they realize that maybe it's not the best fit for them, and then for other people, they realize that it's what they want to do for the rest of their life.
Naturalmente dopo un po' ci sono persone che hanno abbandonato, mentre io invece ho capito che è veramente la cosa che voglio fare nella mia vita.
So, my experience was the second one.
Quindi la mia esperienza è del secondo tipo.
So the more I learn about interpreting, the more I do interpreting, the more I fall in love with it.
Più studio interpretariato e più mi innamoro di questo studio.
And the opportunities I've had are many. And this year, with my practicum, I'm working as an intern at the hospital.
Sto facendo questo tirocinio in un ospedale.
So I have a mentor there in the hospital.
Ho un mentore, un tutor all'interno dell'ospedale.
I learned from her there. And I also learned from working as a student interpreter on campus.
E ho sia questo tutor che sta all'interno dell'ospedale, che viene anche lui, sempre da NTID, insomma, lo stesso istituto di Rochester,
Sì.
e ho anche un tutor all'interno dell'università.
Yeah. So that's, and also this
I have a question.
opportunity. See?
I read in your resume that you have a minor, no? That you are studying performing arts.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us something about that.
Okay. So in high school, I was very involved with dance and
A me piace
with
molto la danza
acting.
e il recitare.
And I knew I wanted to keep pursuing that when I came to college. And so I
E volevo continuare. Quindi.
added studying performing arts. And the slide that Danny showed earlier of the theater,
Prima Danny ha fatto vedere una diapositiva del teatro.
I've been in performances there.
E io ho potuto recitare lì.
RIT is also really working on building up the performing arts in their university. So they have a lot of new opportunities coming about.
L'università offre molte opportunità per chi vuole fare performing arts, arti performativi.
Did you already touch on groups that are at the university? There's one group that is, it's a small, very skilled group of actors who put on performances in ASL.
C'è un gruppo di attori veramente bravi, un gruppo ristretto che fanno teatro in ASL.
So they're called Sunshine 2.0.
Si chiama, no? Adesso cerco di capirlo anch'io. Sunshine 2.0. Sunshine 2.0.
So they travel all over the country.
Viaggiano in tutto il paese.
And they introduce deaf students around the country to NTID through their performances and also to
fanno una
sing the
forma di
language.
promozione facendo degli spettacoli in tutto il paese, e questa diventa un po' una promozione per attrarre studenti al NTID.
Yep. So I've seen some of their work, and I've also seen performances put on by NTID's Performing Arts Department. So like what Danny was saying, they will put on shows where they have big casts and all of the characters have a signer and they have a hearing person being their voice.
Usano un metodo molto simile a questo, perché you're talking about deaf. They have a person.
Yeah, so they'll have a deaf person signing, and then they'll have a hearing person with them who is being their voice, who's speaking.
L'approccio è che la persona sorda segna e c'è una persona invece udente vicino che parla.
Yeah, so I have witnessed these shows and they can be really impactful.
E io quindi posso testimoniare che questa è una cosa che funziona bene.
Switch.
To add on to what Abigail says, one thing we say to our students who are looking to become interpreting majors is that being at NTID is like doing a study abroad program.
Quello che diciamo a molti studenti è che entrare all'NTID è come fare un programma di studi all'estero.
Our students, we recommend that they live in the dormitories, and it's a mainstream dormitory, both hearing and deaf.
E a tutti gli studenti è raccomandato di dormire nel campus, cioè di vivere all'interno dell'università.
So we strongly encourage our students to interact with the deaf community on campus, as well as the larger deaf community out in the city of Rochester.
Noi quindi raccomandiamo così di interagire sia con la comunità sorda all'interno del campus, così come di uscire fuori e interagire con questa che è una delle più grandi comunità sorde d'America, a Rochester.
And that's how we sell NTID to prospective students. With everything I just said, that's how we market or promote NTID for interpreting students to come to our university.
Quindi queste sono tutte le ragioni in virtù delle quali insomma, noi promuoviamo questo appello, diciamo, facciamo questa promozione affinché gli studenti si avvicinino a noi e nei nostri corsi.
97% of our interpreting graduates, within 6 months after graduating, find employment as interpreters.
Il 97% di coloro che si laureano entro 6 mesi circa trovano un lavoro.
And then I already mentioned our program is accredited by, it's called the Collegiate Commission on Interpreting Education, CCIE.
C'è un'importante organizzazione americana che ha accreditato, questa commissione ha accreditato l'NTID come un'eccellente, diciamo, struttura per formarsi.
I am on the commission as well, and we will deem or accredit universities we find meeting our national standards.
E loro si occupano anche di accreditare altre università che incontrano le stesse caratteristiche e hanno, diciamo, la stessa alta qualità.
And we are one of 14, this has gone down since, we are one of 14 other colleges to have this accreditation.
E loro hanno accreditato soltanto 14 corsi, all over the USA.
All over the USA.
Allora, in tutti gli Stati Uniti hanno accreditato soltanto altri 14 corsi, come corsi che hanno uno standard qualitativo paragonabile.
So there's about 130 interpreting programs and only 14 are accredited.
130?
Total programs,
Totally.
and only 14 are accredited. And we're one of 4, so we are
Su
2%.
130 ne hanno accreditati soltanto 14.
2%. That means we're important.
No. You are
I
very
worked,
severe.
I worked very hard to get us accredited. We got accredited in 2020. And I was the one who wrote all of the, so I put my blood, sweat, and tears into becoming accredited. That's questions. I talked a lot. Yes, these are some of our graduates, right? So this was last year's class. This is one of 4 classes or cohorts.
Classe dell'anno scorso. And next year Abigail, so no, in 2 years.
In May. In May, this will be Abigail.
She will be in the picture.
Yes.
L'anno prossimo sarà sulla fotografia anche Abigail. E adesso domande, signorine. Adesso, ok, la presentazione è finita e potete fare domande.
That means you should all come visit.
If I'm not able to write in Italian, if there is an interpreter, please. Come un servizio, cioè B2B.
Sì, sì, un ghostwriter. C'è un po' di differenza.
I understand, I understand. We are, so that's very common that interpreters do that. We have a writing center. So if we have deaf students who are not necessarily proficient in written English,
No, ci sono studenti che naturalmente non sono molto bravi nello scrivere in inglese.
they can request an interpreter.
Possono chiedere un interprete,
An interpreter will go to this writing center with them.
entrambi hanno questo writing center, dove centro di scrittura,
And someone who specializes in writing will support the deaf student and an interpreter will interpret between
e
them.
qualcuno che è specializzato naturalmente darà un supporto,
chiaro,
un
però-
aiuto.
Cioè, quando la patesi è finita per il controllo, when my thesis is finished, if I need someone who can review it.
Review.
Writing center.
Yes. No,
I have a question.
He doesn't pay. No.
Sì, there. Here in Italy, I have to pay by myself the interpreter to review my thesis. Because this is a service apart from my rata.
I have a question. I have a question.
Qualcuno vuole fare cambio? Mezza io.
I have a question. Do you encourage any way to learn written English
Se c'è una traduzione in italiano io
to
non
deaf
so
students to learn written English? Apart from providing assistance with a writing center, basically I suppose that you encourage from the very beginning deaf students to learn English. Because this is exactly what we have done here, we are doing. We encourage you to learn written English.
Incoraggiare.
Studies find in America that when at a very early age deaf students are exposed to both American Sign Language and English, they are much more successful. Those that are just focused on English and they exclude sign language are more likely to not succeed. But when you put the two languages together, they're much more likely to succeed and there's a higher.
Secondo degli studi fatti in America, se gli studenti all'inizio dei loro studi da bambini vengono esposti sia alla lingua dei segni che alla lingua scritta inglese, hanno più possibilità di successo anche scolastico dopo rispetto a quelli che studiano soltanto those who just study written English and they ignore sign language.
Correct.
Rispetto a quelli che sono invece
Is a like a linguistic method.
Correct.
un attimo. Sto cercando di vedere. Lui dice,
L'ho già tradotto.
è chiaro il concetto? Rispetto a quelli che sono forzati a usare soltanto la lingua scritta e non anche la lingua dei segni.
Bilingual model.
Bilingual, modello bilinguistico ha maggiore successo.
Carlo, posso fare una domanda in italiano, però mi traduci. Volevo chiedere che cosa è rimasto del mito dell'uso della dattilologia, del fingerspelling, a Rochester Institute dagli anni 80 in poi.
I would like to know what is the situation today with finger spelling, which used to be quite popular in the past, during the 80s, and now what's the situation?
It's not very common. You might find older deaf people using the Rochester method, which was all finger spelling, but it's relatively rare. In general, you'll find that hearing users of sign language tend to rely on spelling more, but when you meet with culturally deaf people who grew up using sign language from a very early age, use much less finger spelling, much more like
È chiaro? Sono gli studenti udenti che tendono a usare di più il finger spelling, cioè la dattilologia, rispetto agli studenti sordi, e quando lo studente udente frequenta intensivamente gli studenti sordi, anche lui tende a usare meno il finger spelling.
Forse
Aspetti che there was the 1880 when the word start to come si dice? Sentire in inglese.
Undergo.
Milan.
Starts to undergo the Congress of Milan when the church allowed the sign language. Then in 190, thanks to the William Stokes studies and researches in Gallaudet, there was like the boom of sign language in 1980. And here in Italy, thanks to Virginia Volterra, this is a women researcher. Yes. And then in 2000, thanks to technology, we can communicate more easier than the past. And there is a more visual way to communicate, and it's also more easy to learn something thanks to technology. I think that. I hope.
Non è una domanda, è un'affermazione.
Yes. So I think that May is for this cause that finger spelling is using less and
Ok,
Vediamo.
sì, perché anche loro sanno stare.
I am here the rest of the week if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Danny, thank you very much.
Thank you to our
Abigail.
interpreters. Thank you, Julia.
You're welcome.
Abigail.